First of all, thanks for joining. Is everybody set? Should we launch? Okay. First of all, thanks for joining us out here. Last year we did this. We went to each of the 5 precincts. I was given a tour by the precinct captain, and that was really helpful to me, and I think it's also helpful to you, the media and the public. I'll speak. I'll give you a few thoughts from today's tour. Then we'll turn it over to Captain Kessler. Right over here. Captain Kessler will share some specific observations, and you're free to ask Captain Kessler or me some questions. And first of all, citywide, we are seeing a fairly significant reduction in crime year over year from last year. And last year were record lows overall, 30-year lows in property crimes and violent crimes. Having said that, you do see neighborhood by neighborhood or category by category of crime, you can see increases, and this is one of the things that each of the precincts has to work on, is identifying where there are issues and working on those. So here in the Southwest Precinct, we are seeing this year that robberies are up and burglaries are up year over year from last year, so that's something we've got to focus on, although I should say that comes on a very low base of crimes. The Southwest Precinct, has a very low crime rate compared to the other precincts. So we went and took a look at, I just did kind of a circle tour. We went past the tent encampment down at the glass yards. We spoke a little bit about the situation there. I think that the City Council was hopeful that with the announcement of end date and with the provision of outreach services, we'd start to see the numbers of people there going down. Right now, the captain says to me it appears that the numbers of people there are going up. So this is going to be a challenging situation. Moving ahead, we'll continue to do outreach there to try to connect people to services. We stopped by Alki. The violence prevention emphasis patrols are ongoing in each of the precincts. Alki is one of the places which gets a lot of attention here in Southwest. The warm sunny days, the nice evenings tend to draw a big crowd, and they're focusing on bicycle patrols down there. We also chatted a little bit about the fact that West Seattle's getting a little bit more of a nightlife scene than it used to have, particularly up in the Admiral District. So there's also ensuring that there's resources available there around closing time as well. We also took a quick stop by High Point, and in fact on Sunday I visited with folks from Senior Center up there, as well as met with Officer McDaniels. He's the community police team officer up there at High Point. They've been receiving complaints in the summer months of, kids have a little more time on their hands. They were seeing some more activity in the park, concerns about fights or just not feeling safe there. What I heard there at the Senior Center was it feels like things are getting a little better, and the community police team is working with the community on those issues as well. So those were the major issues we looked at as we went around the precinct, and I'll turn it over to Captain Kessler to share his observations.
Thank you. Well, I do want to just say really quickly thank you to the mayor for allowing me to come back to West Seattle, and for all of the folks in West Seattle for welcoming me back. It's been a great 6 months or so since I got back, and as the mayor said, I think that we have some issues that have been kind of significant. The main one here is our burglary rates went up pretty significantly, over 40%. In the last 4 and 8 weeks, we've had a significant downtrend, and that's due specifically to a number of arrests that our officers have made. And in the last, I think, about a week and a half, we actually have had 5 arrests of burglary suspects, and 4 of those, I believe, actually came from 911 calls. And so that's one thing in West Seattle that has not changed is the engagement of our community and the way that people call 911 when they see something suspicious happen. And that's led directly to arrest of some major burglars. That's what's driving our burglary rates back down again. And the other thing I wanted to just say real quickly is safe communities. I was working a little bit last year with the Safe Communities Project. We finished up the primary part of it this year. And that's one of the things that we've taken at the precinct level, in fact, we're having a meeting this week with all of our sergeants to kind of talk about our community engagement piece of where we want to go now. And we've been continuing to do a lot of things we were doing that were working, but we're going to take some of the information that we got from Safe Communities, and we're going to increase some of our outreach efforts in various neighborhoods here in West Seattle and South Park. So from there, other than that, I think the area is doing really well. We've had some great festivals. Last weekend we had the first. We got the I still call it the High U Parade coming up, the West Seattle Parade, and Alki. We've changed our deployment a little bit on Alki. So Alki's been very good. It's busy, but it's been great. Very little incidents, and so other than that, I think we're doing great, and I look forward to continuing to work over here in West Seattle, and appreciate the opportunity to come over and serve our people. And one last plug: August 17th, we have the Precinct Picnic. We're going to be doing it this year in conjunction with North Delridge, so we'll be down at the Delridge Playfield on August 17th. Thanks.
I'll make one more observation before going to Q&A. The Safe Communities work we did was great. We did a lot of small group meetings. We did outreach to a lot of our diverse communities. And then each one of those groups would elect a delegate for a precinct level meeting. We held the precinct level meeting, I'm trying to remember, about 3 months ago. Is that right, Heidi? And it was one of the first ones up at the community center here at High Point, was it? I'm trying to remember what community center it was. Yeah. It's a really good meeting, and one of the things that really struck me at that meeting, it was the first one, and we ended up hearing it from all of the meetings, particularly from our, I remember it was a Vietnamese woman talking. Our Southeast Asian communities really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and have a direct dialogue with officers. For immigrant and refugee communities, a lot of places where they come from, authority figures are somebody you want to hold at arm's length, and so that opportunity to build the bridges was really helpful to them, and hopefully improve the communications. So that with Sergeant Kessler, when he's referring to continuing to increase that outreach, that's the type of thing he was talking about, was making sure we build those relationships and communications between all of our communities in Southwest and all of our communities in the city. So with that, happy to take any questions, as is Captain Kessler. You want to direct them.
Question I was going to originally ask when you were originally going to do this the day after the 4th of July, but I think it's still an issue. It erupted literally citywide.
Yeah.
Is the issue of the fact that though fireworks are illegal in the city, they were everywhere, and I think multiple neighborhoods, including ours, had just endless discussions about them. Any thoughts on what can be done for next year?
I think we're gonna have to have a citywide discussion about this before the next 4th of July, because it's a serious issue. Now, you have to remember, that day is a pretty big day for our police department anyway. We have a huge gathering all around Lake Union with the fireworks. We call in all of our officers. There's a fair bit of overtime charge that day as well to the city with just handling a large event. And with the what happened in Boston earlier in the year, we had an extra emphasis on with the bomb sniffing dogs out, and Seafair was checking packages. So there's a lot of work to be done that day. Then you add on that, the 911 calls spiked that day for responding to fireworks, which are illegal. And it really puts our police department in a very challenging situation, because their resources, their ability, they don't have the opportunity to respond to all of those. Nor can they tell from a call which are the really serious incidents that they should be getting to in order to put a stop to it, as opposed to the not so serious incidents. So I look at this, and I think that this is one where the community's going to have to step up. Neighborhoods are going to have to make a decision. Is this a harmless, enjoyable 4th of July activity, which is tolerated, condoned, even encouraged by neighborhoods? Or is this something that shouldn't be encouraged, condoned, or tolerated? In fact, neighborhoods should come together and enjoy the safe fireworks over Lake Union, or go out, rather than participate on their street. So we're really going to need a partnership with the community on this one, and I think we're going to have a dialogue about what steps we'll do differently next year. But I think ultimately it's not going to be a pure enforcement issue. It's hard to enforce a law when you've got literally thousands of people choosing to treat it not like a law that day. The community's going to have to help us out with this one. Other questions?
You spoke of numbers of crimes in general being
Right.
down. But in many communities, there's still a feeling, even if there's not a specific crime that's happening, a feeling that things are unsafe or unsavory. What are your strategies for dealing with something like that?
No, and that's a great point. So there's the, and you've correctly pointed out that our crime rates have been going down, and we are now at 30-year lows for violent crimes and property crimes. That's, of course, of no consolation to somebody who's been the victim of a crime, and people do feel unsafe in their neighborhoods, or people can feel unsafe in their neighborhoods. And that's, I'd say there's a couple of things around that, and I can go into a lot of detail here, but I'll start at a high level first, and then you can dig a little deeper if you want to. One is we're working on the directed patrols, the use of the predictive policing tools as well. The goal here is to identify those places where we get the most 911 calls from, where there's most likely that crime will occur, and officers then, as part of their patrol, will make it a part of their patrol to be there, get out of their car, and walk around. So those are the directed patrols downtown, and all of the precincts are using this to some degree. Alki is another good example. Having the bicycle officers visible and present can add to a sense of safety and security there in a way that's helpful. And we've gotten positive reports. There was a story in the Seattle Times yesterday about Chinatown, a greater sense of safety and security down there. Still concerns, but the foot patrols, the safety cameras installed by the community, the work in the community and activating the community makes a difference. I think the other strategy was the one we were talking about, which is really working with the communities in a multi-agency kind of way. So the Safe Communities work we did, we had parks and SDOT and our facilities departments there, as well as police. Because if we can look at, if we're doing maintenance in a park, and we can do it in a way that improves sight lines or the like, that can make a difference as well. In the parks, we've added park rangers, so that we'll get some park rangers at Cal Anderson. We'll get more of a presence in the downtown parks as well, Occidental, Westlake, Victor Steinbrook Park. So the Safe Communities work also had the benefit of really building the communication channels between our communities and the precincts, because the work happens at the precinct level. We specifically organize that at the precinct level as well. One of the things that really makes a difference in terms of burglaries, robberies, is if people see something suspicious, calling it in makes a difference. It may not lead to an arrest right then, but it's the type of information that can help build a pattern that our officers can then make an arrest. Robberies and burglaries tends to be one, the thief doesn't do it once. It tends to be multiple times. So if we can have an alert public calling in when they see something suspicious, sometimes that can lead to an arrest, but it can also help us detect the patterns that can make an arrest later and bring down the burglaries and robberies.
You mentioned parks. Let me ask specifically about Victor Steinbrook Park.
Right.
What would you do to fix the situation?
Well, this is what we have been doing. And Victor Steinbrook Park and all of our downtown park present some challenges. The Seattle Weekly actually wrote a good article recently about our Center City initiative and the variety of work we're doing. One piece of this work is what we just described, having officers on foot in the park and present, as well as park rangers. The other thing we have is something called a program called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, which we are expanding. And what that program does is it enables the police to refer low-level offenders, usually they have addiction issues, and get them into services directly, not arrest them and send them to court. The other challenge we're facing is looking at enforcement where appropriate. So what we're trying to do is identify the individuals who are either in need of services, and we can direct them to services with expanded services through leave, or people who refuse to take services and also refuse to follow basic rules around drinking in public, where they are, the sit-lie ordinance, and the like, and looking for an appropriate enforcement tool when that happens. We can hand out tickets. If somebody doesn't pay their tickets enough, we can have the threat of a failure to appear being something that might be helpful in getting somebody to comply with the rules.
I've got a, sorry.
Go ahead.
Those are things that are already in place, but they don't seem necessarily to be working.
Well, we had our very first use of failure to appear in the last 3 years brought against somebody on the waterfront. And what we've been doing is bringing people together so that we have a consensus around when it's appropriate to use enforcement. And our police department and others have been working with the city attorney around when it's appropriate to bring enforcement actions. And I would say lead has been working, and in the sense that people are going into services and getting services, and it's making a difference. Now, we're not going to eliminate the problem. I want to be really clear about that. We have over 2,000 homeless people. It depends how you want to define the problem. We have over 2,000 homeless people sleeping out in Seattle every night, for whom they do not have shelter. With the construction work on the viaduct replacement, a lot of those folks used to sleep under the viaduct, have now moved into Occidental Park or Western Avenue or the like. And it is not a crime to be homeless. So there are things that are breaking the rules, and when people are breaking the rules, we will seek to enforce the rules. But what we have to do is see where our enforcement gaps are as well in terms of how we do that. In terms of drug dealing, our officers make lots of arrests, but that doesn't necessarily lead to a solution if somebody's back out on the street again and there's no consequence for that arrest. So that's what we have to look for, is look for the service gaps to connect people to services, and look for the enforcement gaps for those that are resistant to services or operating, outside the bounds of what's acceptable behavior downtown. And again, being poor is not a crime.
So what's the status of the surveillance camera system decision making?
Good question. I think we're at a point where our police department has come up with a potential set of protocols for their use, and it's going to bring them down to city council for the city council to take a look at those and see what the city council says. As to the particular details, I don't have them in my head as to, we made modifications after listening to people, and now the police department is reaching out to our public safety chair to get his impression of those as well.
Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied that you've had the thorough public vetting that you said we'd have to have?
We've gone out and we've gotten a lot of comments from people, and the next step of the thorough public vetting, of course, will be a city council process, because the city council itself will have to give final approval. So I think between our outreach and the city council review process, there'll be ample opportunity for public review of the rules that would apply to those. And again, we haven't turned those on and will not turn them on until such time as we go through that entire process.
Mayor, I have a quick question for you.
Good to see you.
Hi. Sorry, apologize for being late.
I'm just glad to have you here. We did a few of these, and you guys, we missed you at the other ones, so I'm glad to see you guys today.
About the Zimmerman verdict.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and specifically about the policies of Stand Your Ground.
Well, I think with the combination of the Stand Your Ground law and kind of a permissive gun culture, combined with what appeared to be, racial profiling, it's a potent mix for tragedy like this one. So I made a statement yesterday. I think we have a lot of work to do as a society, both around our gun control laws and how we view each other, and particularly young black men, young Latino men, and young men in general, and how we, young men in general of communities of color, how we deal with that.
Does that work begin here?
I think that work is occurring. I think that work is occurring here in Seattle.
Oh.
Our Seattle Youth Violence Prevention Initiative is one place. Another place is our Race and Social Justice Task Force is working on, with the school district, on issues around suspensions and discipline of school kids. It's disproportionately, the more severe penalties go to the young black kids, young black boys in particular. It's occurring in our Community Police Commission, which is looking hard at work around issues of bias in policing. That's one of their tasks. I think it's happening in really the wonderful community groups that are working to try to change the culture of gun use in the city. I mentioned the Youth Violence Prevention Initiative, but it's more than that. And we really have great community leaders who care about this. So we have work to do here. That's why I made that statement. That's why I made that statement the way I did. That we have work to do. I think it's really easy to point somewhere else, and I think we have to look at ourselves and understand that issues of bias are present in many institutions in our culture, government institutions, community institutions, and we have to be really serious and thoughtful about looking at them. We're not going to see Olympia change its gun laws overnight. We're not going to see the feds change its gun laws overnight. We have to look here, and we're prohibited by Olympia from changing our gun laws. Right? And we've tried to change it, and they won't change it. They won't give us freedom to do it. We have to look at what we can do here to change culture. And that was one of the reasons why I started that Weapons to Words program as well, was so that we could have a conversation with our kids about weapons also. Now, I know in this case it was an older man acting in he was going out to, in his eyes, protect his neighborhood against a dangerous intruder. He was just a young black man heading out to a candy store. Again, that's a potent mix with the stand your ground laws and a permissive gun culture and racial profiling. We've got a lot of work to do to change our culture to prevent tragedies like this.
In my understanding, in Washington State, we have what is similar to a stand your ground.
I understand there's a stand your ground law under, being introduced in the legislature. Yeah. You saw what happened in the last session, Olympia. Lots of folks worked really hard and they couldn't get there. And I think here in Seattle, we'll keep working to change gun laws at the state level, the federal level. We'll keep working to get the authority to do our own thing. But I don't think we should wait for them. I think we have to set our own community standards. And we do that as neighbor to neighbor as to what's appropriate behavior out there. And we do that by taking a close look at bias in our society. That's the whole background behind our Race and Social Justice Initiative, which I've been proud to continue that from our prior mayor, Greg Nichols.
Mr. Mayor, what are you looking for in the next police chief? And is your presence in the mayor's office an impediment to getting the best candidates?
Oh, now we're heading into campaign territory, aren't we? What we know is what we're looking for is somebody who will have the respect of the community, the respect of the force, can work effectively with the Department of Justice to push forward these reforms. And I think Acting Chief Pugil is doing a great job right now in his interim position. And I think it's very clear that it's going to take, we're going to have to get past the election. It wouldn't be fair to the candidates or the public to try to hold the search process while the election's underway. But I think once we get to the other side of that, we've got a good city, we've got a good police force, and we'll go do a search, and I'm sure we'll get good candidates.
Your presence an impediment?
I've spent a lot of time learning here about this city. I've dealt with protests, I've dealt with snowstorms, I've dealt with even a garbage strike. We've dealt with the Department of Justice investigation. We have, right now, we have a community police commission that I fought for in that reform agreement. We have a chief who's committed to reform. We have community leaders and advocates at the table working on reforms with our police officers. Our police union has accepted a new contract that accepts the reforms contained and have dropped their lawsuit against it. So I'm proud of where we are right now, because right now we got everybody pulling together on reform, and we have the lowest crime rate in 30 years.
Here's a question that it has to do sort of multi-jurisdictional, as you were just speaking about.
Now, I'm gonna go here. Now, since you asked that question if I'm an impediment, such as a campaign question, the difference between me and them is I've done the job, and none of them have.
Okay, sorry. So the question I was going to ask is, we've heard from precinct leadership here, and I'm sure elsewhere in the city, about the great work that they're doing. They're nabbing the burglary suspects. Citizens are calling in tips. There is a small problem that's happened in a few of the cases we've covered lately, and I'm not asking about specific cases, but then the charges don't get filed by the prosecutor's office because of some technicality somewhere. Eventually they're filed maybe 6 months later. And so the people go out on the street. In one case, a guy went out on the street, and 24 hours after he got back out, he burglarized somebody else, and then he was back in. Then they set reasonable bail. I'm wondering if you or your staff ever talk with other jurisdictions like the county, for example, which runs prosecutors and so forth, to look at the big picture about that so that their good work doesn't go on.
I do know that our chief speaks with our King County prosecutor on a regular basis to review these types of things. And there is a back and forth between the prosecutors and the police on these issues. So those are the felonies. Misdemeanors are the province of our city attorney, and we also engage in a dialogue with our city attorney, for example, around the failure to appear cases I mentioned earlier. So this is an issue. It's not one that's under our direct control in the city, but we do engage in dialogue with them. I can't speak for them, and I've not tried to get into a space of trying to say, they've got hard jobs too, to make prosecutorial decisions.
May I ask Captain Kessler a question?
Yeah.
Hi, Linda Brill. I'm going to ask you about the Stand Your Ground. Here you represent the Southwest Precinct, a very diverse area. What is your thought on whether or not that is a problem in terms of law enforcement and crime here in this precinct?
Well, if I think I understand your question, it's about does issues like Stand Your Ground impact what we do and how we do it? The answer to that is no. Our officers are out working every day. We work within the confines of the laws and the policies and procedures that we have. And so as far as our officers and the work that they do, it doesn't impact anything. Now, I may have personal feelings about whether I think certain laws are good or bad, but we operate within the rule of law, and I think the rules in Washington are certainly different than what they have in Florida, and so they work very well for us.
Do you think a case that happened in Florida, is that something that's likely or unlikely to happen here because of the difference in the law? Would it have been handled differently? Do you see any differences?
Well, I can't really tell you what I think would happen, but I can tell you this. I know in Seattle and in this area we have incredible investigators, and the major crimes that we've had have been very well investigated. We have great prosecutors. We have a really different system than a lot of other places. And I think we have incredibly professional officers. I think we have incredibly professional prosecutors. And we work, for the most part, we work incredibly well together. So, no, I don't really see any similarities between what happened there and what happened here.
Just to clarify then, would your investigative arm have been stronger in a case here than you saw that happen in Florida?
Well, it's difficult because I haven't looked at I don't have privy to look at the investigatory files, so I don't really know what they did and how they did it. I saw probably fewer snippets on the news than any of you did, so I really couldn't tell you how good a job they did, but I do know what our people do here. And I'm pretty proud of the work that our guys do here in this precinct, our investigative team, as well as on the department.
I think it's probably true for both Captain Kessler and me that we tend to have our heads really focused in on what's happening right in front of us, him on his precinct, here on the city as well, and trying to work on the issues here.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I got here a little late, but can you tell me why you're here in terms of safe communities here at the Southwest Precinct?
Yeah, so we've done Safe Communities work where we've reached out to community members in each of the communities, asked them what they care about. But we did this last year too. We went out and went to each of the 5 precincts. It's an opportunity for me to hear directly from the captains about what the issues they're facing are, and actually an opportunity for the captains to interact with you and the media. And this actually goes to, a couple of different goals we have. One, improving our community outreach, improving transparency, and making the police department more available to you for direct questions. I've heard in the past from some of you that you like this opportunity, so we've tried to make this available. And we also make it a little more localized by making it precinct by precinct. So in this case, we're joined by the West Seattle Herald and the West Seattle blog, who can really, dig in a little, report more locally to their avid readership as well.
And I have a question for Captain Kessler, following up on one thing you said, which would be, you mentioned that the strategy on Alki has changed up a bit this summer. How so? What can you tell us?
Well, we have, and again, thanks to the mayor and the chief, we have a little bit more opportunity to allocate some of our violence prevention resources from around the city. As you know, in the last couple of years, we've put together some pretty robust department-wide and city-wide resources to keep our nightlife industry safe. And so one of the things that we've done is at the precinct level this year, we actually have more control over how our resources are being used. So we've been actually moving them toward Alki. So we have more officers working specifically Alki during the day and in the evening time, and then also in our own precinct. And so I think that's actually helped a lot. And things seem to be working very well down in Alki. I talk to people there every day, and we've had very few incidents. We've had a lot of people, obviously, with the great weather we've had, and so that's been the biggest thing, I think, is being able to get our resources and have more flexibility in movement.
Any other questions? Thank you. And I just want to say, I do really appreciate with our police department, through everything they've been dealing with the last few years, that they're out there every day working to keep us safe, and they can see it in genuine outcomes in terms of the reductions in the crime rates. So I'm very proud of the work our police department has done with the community on this. So thank you all for coming out.